Ethan Cole saw them when the sun had already begun to scorch everything, left behind on the desert floor. A large Apache woman stood there, broad shoulders, sinewy arms like a warrior's. She could barely stay upright. Her left leg was wrapped in dirty cloth, and the blood had dried into a crust of dark black. Every step she took brought a slight tremble, but she held on to the child in her arms with all her strength. The child was a boy, small, his head slumped against his mother's shoulder, lips cracked, eyes shut tight. Ethan pulled his mule to a stop. His hand clenched the rez. This was not his business. Out here, a poor farmer living alone could not afford kindness. Kindness would kill you faster than a bullet. He had learned that the night his wife burned with fever, and the night their unborn child followed her into the dark before it could take its first breath. The Apache woman looked up. Her eyes were deep and black, but there was no pleading in them, just emptiness. The kind of exhaustion that comes from walking for days and knowing you are about to fall. Ethan glanced at the canteen hanging from his saddle. It was just water, but he knew too well giving them water meant keeping them here, and maybe bringing trouble with the tribe. The boy let out a faint moan, a tiny weak sound, barely even there. Ethan swore under his breath. He stepped down, unhooked the canteen, and held it out. The woman took it, her hands trembling but steady. She took a sip, then offered it to the boy first. When the boy's lips touched the water, Ethan knew there was no going back now. Just a mouthful of water, but sometimes the smallest thing is enough to kill a man or force him to live a different life forever. But sometimes the smallest thing is enough to kill a man or force him to live a different life. Ethan brought them into the small wooden cabin. The Apache woman stepped in first, but when her left foot touched the floor, her body froze. A sharp breath escaped her lips, wordless. Ethan saw it clearly. The wound on her leg was swollen, dark red, the smell of infection mixing with old sweat and road dust. She had walked too far. For too long, the boy was laid on the only bed in the house. His skin was burning hot. His breathing was rapid and shallow. Each inhale looked like a battle against some invisible wall. Fever. Ethan swallowed hard. He had seen this before. He boiled water. He wiped the boy down with a piece of old cloth. Every move was slow and careful, like he was afraid that being just a little too rough would make everything fall apart. The woman Nako sat leaning against the wall, teeth clenched against the pain, eyes never leaving her son. She did not ask. She did not ask. She did not ask. She did not beg. She just watched like a wounded animal, tracking every motion around her young. The night dragged on. The oil lamp crackled softly. Wind whistled through the cracks in the wood. Out there, the desert did not care who lived or who died. The boy whimpered. Ethan placed a hand on his forehead. The boy whimpered. Ethan placed a hand on his forehead. The heat jolted him. Old memories crashed in, his wife lying on the bed, cold sweat, shallow breaths, his hand gripping hers, helpless, foolish, believing that just being there would make it all okay. It was not okay. It had never been okay. Ethan sat through the night. He did not sleep. He did not leave. He did not leave. He wiped the boy's forehead, changed the water, whispered nonsense, then sat in silence, staring at the small flame. At times, he asked himself what he was doing. This boy was not his son. This woman did not belong to his world. This boy was not his son. And by morning, someone might come knocking and bring trouble with them. But then the boy's breathing slowed. The shaking eased. The heat began to fade, little by little, like floodwaters finally pulling back. Ethan did not realize he had been holding his breath. Outside, the sky began to change color. A long night that offered no sleep, but maybe, just maybe, gave a child another chance to live. And Ethan knew whether he wanted it or not. From this moment on, his life had been pulled in a new direction, one that no road he had known before could ever lead him back from. Morning came slowly, as if even the sun hesitated before touching Ethan's wooden cabin. The boy woke up first, his eyes opened, still cloudy, but alive. He looked around, then at Ethan. He did not cry. He simply watched, the kind of watching that belongs to a child who has learned that silence is the key to survival. Ethan handed him some water. The boy drank in small, careful sips like a grown man. The Apache woman stood. Nakoa, she braced herself against the wall, pushing her back straight. When she set her left foot down, the muscles in her face tightened. A wave of pain moved through her, sharp and unrelenting. but she made no sound. Ethan saw all of it, and he hated that. Hated the way some people endured without giving themselves permission to look away. Nakoa spoke first. Her voice was low and hoarse-worn, thin by thirst and a sleepless night. "We cannot stay here long." Ethan nodded. That made sense. It was necessary. It was right. She looked directly at him. "But I will not go back there." "Ethan Froza," she continued plainly without asking. She had been forced to marry a man named Koda, a well-known warrior, a man who used violence to silence the truth. Her husband had died after a fight no one dared to speak of. Everyone knew. No one said a word. "The tribe calls it order," she said. "I call it a grave." Ethan leaned against the table. Things were slipping out of his control. Nakoa looked down at the boy, then back at him. "I choose you." The words dropped into the little room like a hammer. "You will be his father," she said slowly. "And my man." Ethan gave a short, dry laugh. There was no joy in it. "You pick." "To the wrong man," he said. "I am not. You stayed." She cut in. "You stayed up all night. You did not walk away." Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. He looked out the window. The desert stretched wide, empty, full of exits, but none of them clean. "There is no love," the co-ed added. "No promises, no chains, just survival." Ethan stayed quiet for a long time. Finally he spoke, his voice low. "If someone comes looking for you, they will," she said, "and the boy is who they will want first." Ethan looked at the child, then at Nakoa, then down at his hands, the same hands that had once been helpless in the face of death. "Then listen closely," he said. "I do not need to love you." Nakoa waited. "But if anyone comes to take the boy," Ethan continued, "they will have to go through me first." Nakoa gave a single nod. The agreement was not made with vows. It was made with vows. It was made with something far heavier, a choice that could never be taken back. The days that followed passed slowly, as if Ethan's small wooden cabin was trying to forget where it was. In the mornings, he lit the fire. By noon, he worked on fixing the fence. In the evenings, he bandaged Nakoa's leg. By noon, he worked on fixing the fence. In the evenings, he bandaged Nakoa's leg. Everything moved quietly. No questions, no unnecessary explanations. Nakoa was a large woman. When she sat on the low chair in the kitchen, her knees nearly touched the underside of the table. Her arm muscle stood out with every fiber when she gripped the seat's edge as Ethan changed the dressing. The wound on her left leg was still swollen, red, aching, a mark left by too many days of walking without rest, of putting the child's life above her own body. She did not complain. She just breathed deep and stayed silent. Toma started to laugh. A short laugh, sudden like wind slipping through a cracked door. Ethan froze the first time he heard it. He turned away, pretending to look for the hammer, not because the laughter bothered him, but because it reminded him of sounds that should have existed in this house long ago. One night, the wind came early. Sand tapped against the walls. The oil lamp burned low. Ethan knelt down to bandage Nakoa's leg, just like always. Her skin gave off warmth close enough for him to feel her breath. Nakoa looked down at him. The firelight cast her shadow on the wall. Tall, steady, not the shape of someone who needed to be protected. She spoke, her voice low, and even without invitation. "I have not been touched by a man in many months." Ethan froze, his hand stopped in midair. In that brief moment, the small room seemed to shrink, not because of desire, but because of the raw truth, in the words of someone who had long been treated like a tool and was now naming something that belonged to her. Ethan stood up immediately. He stepped back, then stepped back again, as if afraid of his own breath. "No," he said, not angry, not judging, just a line being drawn. Nakoa nodded, slightly confused. From that night on, they were more careful. Fewer touches, fewer glances, and somehow that made everything heavier. The next morning, Ethan found horse tracks near the creek, faint, but real. He said nothing. Nakoa did not ask. By evening, she said only one thing, as the wind carried the smell of smoke from far away. "They are looking for us." Ethan clenched his fists. The warmth inside the little house was still there, but from this moment on, it had become something dangerous. They came in the morning when the mist still clung low to the dry grass. Ethan heard the horses before he saw the men, not the scattered hoof, beat-ats of someone lost, but a steady, controlled rhythm, the kind of movement made by people who knew exactly where they were going and why. He stepped out onto the porch. They stood just beyond the fence, 6 Apache men, sitting tall in their saddles, their eyes fixed on the cabin as if measuring a piece of property. In the center was Haas Nakoa's father, an elder. His age showed in the gray of his hair and in the way he sat still, needing no proof of his authority. To his right was Koda. Ethan recognized him instantly, though they had never met. Koda wore a thin smile. His lip curled as if he already knew how it would end. He did not look at Ethan for long. His gaze was fixed on the cabin, on the spot where Toma stood behind. Nakoa. No one spoke. The silence lasted long enough for Ethan's throat to dry. At last Hashi spoke. His voice was deep and slow, carrying no anger. My daughter has gone too far. Nakoa stepped forward, her left leg still weak, but she stood tall. I made my choice, she said. Haas looked at her for a long time, then at Toma. His eyes rested on the boy a moment longer than the others. That child belongs to the tribe. Ethan felt the blood rush to the tribe. Ethan felt the blood rush to his ears. No, Nakoa said. He belongs to where he can live. Koda gave a short laugh. Tried, Jarp. This white man gave you shelter, he said. Not a place. Ethan stepped forward. He did not raise a hand, did not reach for a weapon. He just stood. You will not take him, he said. His voice did not shake. Koda turned to look at him. For the first time, his eyes swept over Ethan from worn boots to the frayed edge of his shirt. And what do you ask? To stand between us? Ethan did not answer right away. He looked at Toma, then at Nakwa, then at Hakshe. I am the one who stayed, he said, when they had no one else. A gust of wind passed through. Dust swirled softly around the horse's hooves. Hoshi raised his hand. Koda fell silent. We came to restore order, the elder said. Ethan understood that was the scarier part, because order did not need blood. It only needed surrender. And Ethan knew that if he stepped back even once, Toma would be gone before the sun touched the edge of cave, the sky. He stood his ground, not out of courage, but because there are some things once you step in front of them, there is no going back. Ethan stepped forward again, not as a challenge, just to stand fully between them and Toma. He felt it right away, the shift in the air. The horses shifted slightly. A few hands moved closer to their weapons, but no one drew. Not yet. O'Shea looked at Ethan as if seeing him for the first time. Not as a poor farmer, not as a reckless man, but as someone who had placed himself inside a choice that could never be taken back. You do not carry our blood, the elder said. You have no right, Ethan nodded. I know. He did not argue. He did not beg. That made a few of the warriors look at him differently. I am not his father, Ethan continued. I am not Apache. I have no law standing behind me. Koda smirked. He waited for the collapse. But I am the one who chose. Ethan said, his voice lowered, chose to stay, chose to care, chose to stand in front of that boy when no one else would. The silence stretched. Nakoa stepped up beside him. She did not touch Ethan, just stood there, tall, solid, her left leg still weak, but her back straight. I spoke the truth, she said, about my short ride. About my husband. Hasha turned his gaze to his daughter. Koda killed him, Nakoa said, not in battle, not by law, but because he tried to speak about what Koda did to the other women. No words, just breath shifting. Koda stepped forward, half a pace. Lies. Nakoa looked him straight in the eye. She did not flinch. You know I am not lying. Hosh closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, his gaze was heavier on the child. He asked, Toma is not property. Nakoa answered, he is my son, and I have chosen the man who will stand beside him. Hoser looked at Ethan again. You willing to die for this? He asked. Ethan did not answer. Asked. Ethan did not answer. All right, away. He looked at Toma, at the small hands clinging tightly to the hem of Nakoa's shirt, at the woman beside him who did not plead, who did not beg, who simply believed he would not step back. No, Ethan said. I am willing to live with it, not a heroic answer, but the right one. No one drew a gun. No one shouted. Only the truth stood there, exposed between men who had grown used to hiding it. And in that moment, Ethan understood, some battles do not end in blood. They end with whoever has the strength to stand still the longest. They end with whoever has the strength to stand still the longest. Apache did not speak right away. He stood there between the men who had followed him their entire lives, between his daughter and a stranger who belonged to no law he had ever known. Wind swept across the plains, carrying fine dust, just enough to sting the eyes, but not enough to hide anyone's gaze. Koda broke the silence first. He stepped forward half a pace, looking only at Hashi. "Law is law," he said. "If we let this go today..." Hashi raised his hand. Koda stopped. Just a gesture, no shouting, no threat, but it was enough to remind everyone who still held the right to pass judgment. His gaze did not soften, but it was no longer carved in stone. "You have made your choice," he said, "and that choice has been heard. No apology, no public naming of wrongs, just a cold acknowledgement, the kind made by someone who had lived long enough to know that some things cannot be fixed, only left where they are." He turned to Ethan. "You are not one of us," Hoshi said, "and you never will be." Ethan nodded. He expected nothing else. "But today," the elder continued, "you stood in place of the law. When the law stayed silent," Koda clenched his jaw. A flicker of something crossed his face. Not fear, but the sting of having something he thought certain taken away. "The child will stay," Hashi said. With high, a smother, with the man he calls father. No one cheered. No one cheered. No one exhaled. Decisions like that do not come with sound. Hoshi turned his horse. The others followed. None of them looked back. Koda was the last. None of them looked back. Koda was the last. Before he left, he glanced at Ethan. A look that promised this was not the end. Only a step back. Ethan met his eyes and did not blink. Then they were gone. The yard was empty again. The wind still blew. The yard was empty again. The wind still blew. The wooden cabin stood just as small and fragile as before. Nakoa stood still for a long time. Only when everything had quieted did she let her shoulders drop, as if only then her body was allowed to feel the weight of it all. Ethan said nothing. He did not smile. He just stood there, his hands still trembling, slightly. He just stood there, his hands still trembling slightly. Not from fear, but from knowing he had just crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Justice had not been named. Be uncrossed. Justice had not been named. But some days, surviving, with your honor intact, that is enough. After they left, the quiet returned, like an animal familiar with the scent of home. No noise, no release, just the space where hoofbeats had once stood. Ethan remained on the porch for a while longer, eyes on the horizon. The wind carried the scent of warm earth and dry grass. Everything looked the same, and yet nothing was the same, and yet nothing was the same anymore. Toma was the one who broke the silence. The boy tugged gently at Ethan's shirt. "Father," the word fell between them like a small stone dropped into still water. No big splash, but enough to ripple out. Ethan bent down. He did not correct him, did not ask him to repeat it. He simply placed a hand on the boy's head. Firm, brief, just enough to say, "I am here." Nika watched. She did not smile, just exhaled, slowly, like someone who had finally set down something heavy. In the days that followed, they did small things. Ethan repaired the fence. Nakoa practiced walking, step by step, her left leg still aching, but healing. Toma ran around the yard, counting stones, asking questions that needed no answers. In the evenings, they ate together. Not much talking. None was needed. Sometimes Ethan found himself listening to sounds this house had never known before. The clink of bowls on the table, the soft drop of a spoon, the steady breathing of a child asleep. The soft drop of a spoon, the steady breathing of a child asleep. There were times he wondered how long it would last, thought about harder days to come. But then he remembered his own answer, not to die for this, but to live with it. One morning, Ethan built a second bed. Nakoa helped, holding the plank steady with her strong arm. When it was finished, Toma climbed up and giggled. Ethan stepped back and looked at the two of them, bathed in the soft sunlight pouring through the window. He had made no vow. There was no ceremony, no document or decree to protect them. Only a choice repeated every day. As night fell, Nakoa stood by the door looking into the darkness. She spoke, her voice low. "This is home." Ethan nodded. He looked around the cabin. Small, old, once a shelter for a man's grief. Now it held warmth for 3 people. Not because of blood, but because they had chosen each other when no one made them do so. And if anyone were to ask him, an older man now who had lived long enough, whether it had been worth it, Ethan knew the answer. But what about you? If it were you, would you have stood your ground when the whole world told you to walk away? Ethan Cole never thought of himself as a good man. He was just a poor farmer, surviving the dry seasons and nights longer than any man should endure. He had prayed once, made promises, believed that if he lived right, the world would give something back. But the world did not. It took his wife, took the child who never had a chance to breathe, and left behind an empty house in Mearns, with no one calling his name. Ethan's kindness did not come from a belief in reward. It came from somewhere deeper, from knowing what it felt like to lie there helpless, waiting for something that would never come, from knowing the feeling of watching a life slip away and being unable to stop it, and from knowing that if he turned his back one more time, he would no longer be the man his wife once believed in. He did not give water to be thanked. He did not stay up all night to be remembered. He did it because in that moment, not doing it would mean living with a version of himself he could not face. Ethan did not stand in front of a child to be a hero. He stood there because if he stepped aside, he would have to live with the look in that boy's eyes of a life left behind. His kindness was not loud. It did not ask for witnesses. It did not demand the world to change. It simply said, here, in this moment, one man chose not to turn away. And sometimes, in a land as harsh as the frontier, one man like that is enough to make a family begin. The story you just heard contains some fictionalized details generated with the help of artificial intelligence, not to distort history, but to help us imagine a piece of the old American West where people lived among hardship, choices, and the price that came with them, a short ride, and the price that came with them. Through these scenes, I only hope to share a few simple lessons about kindness, love, and courage, things that still matter just as much today. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to the channel to support my work. It has been an honor sharing it with you. Dear audience of Best Wild West Stories, wherever you are, I hope you remain safe and find peace. And hey, drop a comment with the number 9 if this story spoke to you. Thank you so much for watching.